Hello, welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. We have 3 stories for you today. I need a degree to get promoted? Fine, I'll leave to get one. Compliance. And ask the wrong question. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Alright, let's get started. Our first story. I need a degree to get promoted? Fine, I'll leave to get one. While I was a college student in the 1980s, I accepted a job as a second-shift computer operator at a large regional bank. The job duties included processing all the checks and payments, printing statements and checks, running all the backups, and so on. On the day I showed up for the job, I learned that I wasn't getting that job but a lower one that physically loaded the check readers, loaded printer paper, signed checks, burst forms, and so on. The lead computer operator had apparently threatened to quit if they didn't promote internally and give the job to one of the current people in the position I just ended up in. They later got married, so you can probably figure out her actual motive, but the department manager, Mr. Biggs, my boss's boss, told me that I would be promoted to computer operator as soon as anyone left the position. You guessed it. 2 years later, no one has left the position, and we have acquired another regional bank. Our CEO told the CEO of the acquired bank that no employees would be fired, so suddenly, we had an extra computer operator on every shift. But Mr. Biggs insisted I'd still get promoted because he knew I was the most computer literate employee he had, something he used to his advantage in numerous side projects that should have been paid at a much higher rate. 6 months later, one of the computer operators finally transferred to the programming department. I asked Mr. Biggs to promote me to the position, and he told me he was working on it. A few months later, he finally tells me that they still have too many computer operators because of the acquisition, and I won't be promoted until more of them leave. Clearly, this wasn't working, so a few months later another position opened in the programming department, and I applied for it. Mr. Biggs signed the form allowing me to apply and wished me luck. The interviews went well, and programming wanted to hire me, but a few days later the computer operator who transferred there told me, privately, that Mr. Biggs went to the head of programming and asked him not to consider me for the position because I was his best employee and he couldn't afford to lose me. The head of programming told him, "No. I'm going to hire the best person for the job." The next morning, the HR director calls me to say that one of the executive vice presidents wants to interview me for the position. She's flabbergasted because he's never asked to interview anyone of that level and couldn't explain why he wanted to know. After the interview, the HR director called me, apologized profusely, and told me they were giving the position to another candidate because he had a college degree. No, it wasn't related to the position in any way. The degree was from an unaccredited college, which had actually asked me to teach computer courses there, which I'd turned down. Of course, I knew what had really happened, so I told the HR director that I hadn't realized how important a degree was and that I would immediately switch to part-time instead of full-time so I could take more hours of classes to finish my degree more quickly. There are no part-time positions in Mr. Biggs' department, so it meant transferring to the department run by his biggest competitor within the company. She transferred me immediately at the same pay I was making in the previous department, and I never worked for Mr. Biggs again. TLDR, my boss's boss secretly kept another manager from promoting me because he didn't want to lose his best employee, but the company told me it was because I didn't have a degree, so I transferred out of his department for part-time work to dedicate more time to pursuing my degree. Our next story. Compliance. My first, real, job was scooping ice cream, which largely consisted of me shuffling around behind a standing cooler in the courtyard of a larger establishment. Our business was goat cheese, and I was an extension of that, goat milk ice cream. Our clientele was very sporadic as we lived on an island, so the timing of the ferry was suspiciously similar to that of our busy periods. I worked from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. 4 days a week, earning minimum wage. I don't know if I was on the books or not, but I always got paid. Here's the problem: when 5 p.m. rolls around, I'd tally up sales and the box of change, wash all the scoops, tables, and coolers, and pack all the cones and cups away inside. The rest of the place would stay open for a few more hours, selling cheese and cafe food. However, the sun was pretty hot that summer, and customers would routinely walk up at 5:05 and ask for ice cream only to hear I was closed, and I'd direct them to the people running the actual store to scoop it for them. This was a huge hassle for the store, but I loathed scooping just you guys and then having people trickle in for 30 minutes. I brought this up to my boss and asked to extend my shift by 30 minutes so that I could cover the stragglers after 5. I was told to close at 5 and to make it more obvious that I was closed. After about a week of sitting in the break room and counting change, basically hiding from customers, someone noticed. I'm signing out, and the big cheese, who owns the entire operation, comes up and asks why I'm not serving customers after 5. I'm sorry, but I'm only scheduled until 5 p.m., but if you bumped me to end at 5:30, I'd be glad to stick around. The schedule for next week rolls around, and I guess he spoke to my boss, because I suddenly had an extra cushy 30 minutes added onto my shifts from then on. I bought my first computer from that job. Good times. TLDR, $5.50 is worth customer satisfaction. And our last story. Ask the wrong question. Years ago, I worked as a bookkeeper for a small family business. The owner was a cranky old codger who was perpetually in a bad mood. One of my responsibilities was making bank deposits. This was pre-internet, so I literally had to take an envelope with cash and checks to the bank. If they were closed, they had a slot in the wall for nightly deposits. Sometimes I was able to get there before they closed, and other times I had to use the night deposit. On one particular day, the owner called me into his office and asked if I was going to make a deposit that day. I planned to make a night deposit, so I wanted to clarify if he meant while the bank was open. I got as far as asking, "Do you mean?" When he slammed his hand on the desk and yelled, "Are you making a deposit today?" Cue malicious compliance. I simply answered his question, "Yes." A couple of days later, he stormed up to my desk and demanded to know why I had not made a deposit the day he asked. It had apparently caused some huge problems with his cash flow. I calmly replied that I did make a deposit that day, but it had been a night deposit and that he had not given me a chance to clarify. He clearly didn't like the answer, but he dropped it and went off in a huff. I quit not long after that. Well, that's all for this video. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you all in the next one.